Good evening and welcome to another edition of My Take with yours truly, Joel Bhagwandin. First, let me apologize to you for not for missing a few weeks, and that is because uh, there has been a lot of events taking place that had prevented me from carrying the show. Nonetheless, we're here, and joining me this evening is a very good colleague, an associate of mine, uh, and I should say a follower and follower slash fan of my writings, Mr. Mark Weeks, who is a project management consultant and a political analyst. So, Mark, welcome this evening, and
Thank you.
thank you for joining me on this program. So, this evening, what we want to talk about, there's been some trending issues in the media, and some of it were addressed to some extent by the vice president. So, what we want to talk about tonight is the first controversial topic is the Marriott. How was it originated? The whole history behind it, the the circumstances surrounding it, and all of that. And I'll first like to invite Mark to share his thoughts on based on all the debates and the exchanges
Yeah.
in the media. I thought when I listened to the last press conference by the vice president, I thought that you know I, I I don't need to address this matter because I think he did a fantastic job explaining and going into the history. And I saw a letter as well by the former Prime Minister uh, Samuel Hines, who is now ambassador in the US. So, um, notwithstanding all of that, we still have to address some of these issues because one particular media house, I don't need to name it, you, the viewers, would know which media house, media entity slash publisher I'm referring to, keeps bringing out different dimensions of this issue and running a series on a particular on a certain social media platform. So, Mark, from where you,
hmm
before before I allow you to speak on the topic,
Okay.
to your benefit, let me give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background,
hmm
and a little bit, a short intro about yourself for our viewers because you're very new to this program.
Yes.
And perhaps any program of these, I think you're probably new. You'll
Yes.
correct me if I'm wrong, and then you'll launch into that.
All right. Great. So, good evening, Joel. Good evening, viewers. My name is Mark Weeks. So, as Joel previously said, I'm a political analyst and project management consultant. So, I'm a born Guyanese. I do have a diverse or do have a diverse range of experience in terms of analytics and travel. So I not only come from a background of analyzing Guyana and its context, but understanding how it correlates with the activities of the broader world on a macro scale. Yes. So what am I here to speak about tonight? I'm here to represent not only in my personal capacities, my views towards the issues that Joel previously referenced, but I'm also here to try to see how best I can clarify without using sophisticated jargon so that the average man can probably understand what I'm saying. Because most often there are some information that can be misinterpreted, particularly because of the range of comprehension that one may have. So, as it specifically relates to the Marriott, so as Joel referenced, we'll start there. Um, as a public-private um, investment interest, it is quite fitting for persons to understand what is the government's role within such an investment interest, and how are they serving the Guyanese society and citizenry by engaging the way that they did. So the role of the government is to actually contribute towards the society for public good. Now, what is public good? Many people may ask. Public good Is the government engaging into the economy, engaging through their arms of government, through their institutions, given their specific mandates to be able to deliver quality within view of economic and social development combined. Now, that of itself is a broad heading and a generalization for a public good. But the main fact is that it is to develop the average Guyanese or the average person quality of living. And so you may ask, how does that correlate to the Marriott? That correlates to the Marriott by being able to do two things. One, the government comes in to facilitate investment interest by seeking foreign investors, FDI, foreign direct investment, and by trying to create job opportunities for the locals. Because many persons know that the only way that job creation can be facilitated is by the constant expansion of the economy or the activities of business-related activities of the economy. Um, Many persons have a lot of interest of why the Marriott is being sold. That of itself, Mr. Bhagwandin will go into because that's his area of economics. But from a political, analytical standpoint, government or the public sector is quite different than the private sector in terms of mandate. And why is that so? Because it is to support and stimulate the private sector in relation to growth and growth-related activities in view of private sector profitability. Now, from the government end or from the public sector's end or contribution, how can they do so? They must support investment without view of specific profitability for the public sector, because otherwise it goes against their mandate. But as long as it contributes towards the development and expansion of the private sector, yes, that's a good thing. So many people may misinterpret the role of government or the roles of particular entities of government and how they deliver their mandates through these entities. And I think what is quite important for persons to understand is when you're listening to information or you're listening to particular individuals critique a situation, you must first analyze from this perspective what authority do they have to speak on this matter? Are they educated on this matter? And if so, how much? Do they have any agendas? Any hidden agendas? Because most time in communication, people have alternate agendas. Are their agendas sincere? So even if you have agendas, is it sincere? Is it beneficial to the wider populace or the citizenry of Guyana more so? So there's a lot to take into context as to why people say and do what they do. And when I say people, I'm referring to the persons that who may be particularly critiquing the government's contribution and mannerism in which they execute certain function and roles in society. It is quite disappointing that some persons have taken that standpoint. I do understand if you're running a business and you need to have sales that is generated on someone's interest to open a newspaper or to be attracted to a particular media source, you may need to have catching headlines. But my contention is this: let those headlines be what truly represents the activities in Guyana. Let those headlines be what truly represent the activities that benefit the Guyanese. So if you're critiquing, let us critique it from a technical standpoint. Let us critique it from, okay, if someone is critiquing something that is financially based, then produce financial information with a financial analysis to support, rather than using broad generalizations. And I'm going to say this humbly and respectfully. Me sitting here this evening, having this conversation and having this this discussion here being facilitated by Mr. Bhagwandin represents two things. It represents concerned individuals in society. It represents persons of two different ethnic backgrounds coming together to represent something that is meaningful, which is clarity, which is contributing to sustainable development in terms of us trying to bring clarity and moving away distortions or anything that might affect people in a way that they don't know what is going on. They they would like to have information and don't know the correct sources or references, or or generally they like to know how can we access the benefits of what is going on in Ghana. So the level of investment that went into Marriott or investment interest, that was just there to stimulate the growth within the hospitality sector. And also, as I said before, to contribute towards employment. Because many people, especially young people out there, that I hope that is watching this program, is well aware of probably job hunting for months. Some of them, sadly, for years, simply because you may be qualified, and if there is no available opening or vacancy, specifically within the area of your qualification, it may be quite difficult for you to attain passive income by having a job. And so the government, when they're looking for these range of investment interests, or they're looking for 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 different support avenues, they're looking for it within full benefit and within full interest of the public or the citizenry. Uh, for example, if you were to run a business and you don't have sufficient capital or finance to have that business expand to the degree that you would like it to, you'll obviously need to seek some partnership or some degree of external source of finance. And if you don't qualify by assets or different other whatever is the matrix that the banks are using to qualify you for a loan of a particular degree, you'll probably need the assistance of someone else. So it is within that level of simplicity that the administration seeks to have private public partnership. Yes.
So, certainly, Mark, thank you very much for that refreshing perspective, and you're absolutely correct. In addition to that, and far beyond that, this Marriott project, or this Marriott Hotel as we have it today, I've been following this, well, not just this development, but I've been following what's happening in our country since in my school days, since in primary school days, in
Yeah.
in especially as a common entrance student.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been following this a very long time, not just the Marriott, but everything in the current affairs in the economy in general, politics, finance, economics, and everything. When I want to speak of this topic from the perspective of the broader development
Mm-hmm.
of the country, and within the context of the challenges we've had as a country in our history,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the necessary thing for the government to do at the time. Why? So let me take the viewers back to a little bit of history, which they can go on on YouTube and find these debates. When the Marriott was built, there were debates facilitated on NCN by the then finance minister, who is the current finance minister as well, by the former CEO of NISL, Winston Brassington, by the publisher of the Kaitro News, Glenn Lal, and prominent chartered accountant Christopher Ram. There were a series of debates, and of course that was on live television. And then, of course, there were the tens of articles and debates in mainstream media whether is this the the best use of taxpayers' money to build a hotel when you have we're still a poor country at the time. Our per capita income then was less than 5,000, or GDP then was less than 4 billion US. So let's understand the broader development perspective. And in the simplest manner possible. The old argument, and which is being repeated now by a certain publisher, is that the Marriott was built to compete with the Pegasus Hotel. But that is far from the truth. The Marriott was not built to compete with the Pegasus Hotel. If one were to look, simple statistics, if one were to look at historical statistics of the travelers, people coming to Guyana, thousands of people coming to Guyana, amounting to more than 100,000 a year, and that number keeps increasing every year. And you look at the number of hotel rooms we have in the country, and you can't go and count all them road corner hotel.
Correct.
If you're having tourists and people from the diaspora and corporate executives and let's call it foreigners, visitors, let's call it visitors, coming to this country, you can't expect them to, you have to have proper facilities to service our visitors, proper standard of service and quality. So back then the Pegasus was the only was perhaps the only high-end hotel we had. So there was a
within
need
a certain commercial range also.
Exactly. So that's one dimension of the argument. But the bigger dimension of the argument, or the most important one, the Marriott Hotel was, well, not particularly the Marriott brand, but the need to have more hotels of a certain standard, for example, 5-star standard in Guyana, was part of the tourism development strategy, which was integrated in the broader national development strategy of the country since 1996. And in order to implement those strategic goals, if you want to attract more visitors to your country, you want more people to come to your country, and not just for tourism activities, but also commercial activities, investment, attracting foreign investors to come to your country to do business, you got to build the infrastructure.
Correct.
So the feasibility of the Marriott was dependent as well on building the stadium and on building the airport. You can't build a stadium to hold 15,000 people of a 15,000 capacity and host, let's say, 4 major events a year, and that you will attract people to come, that you will promote these events for people to come to these events, cricket, for example. And you can't expand your airport, because the only way you can accommodate an increased flow of visitors into your country, you got to build the support infrastructure for that, so that you could accommodate more aircraft, more flights per day.
Correct.
So you got to build the airport. So the Marriott, the airport, and the stadium are connected. Okay? Because if you build a stadium, you don't have proper hotel to put them up. What's the point? People not gonna come where they're gonna stay. Right?
And everybody has a different quality of
so
interest.
this is how you gotta look in the this is how you have to look in the broader context of things. And so it was a need, not because the government wanted to get into this to compete with whoever owned the Pegasus then, but it was necessary. And this was confirmed by both the vice president and the former Prime Minister Samuel Hines in his letter to the editor, where the government was trying to attract a private investor through equity participation, and then the same media house, the same critique chased the people away. And this was not only unique to those investors, but generally, imagine how much more investors are scared to come because of adverse publicity, because of propaganda, because of, look what they're doing to Exxon, for example. It's only because Exxon is a huge company, a multi-billion-dollar global company, so that's like nothing for them. It has no impact on them. But a smaller company, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for them.
Yes.
So the Marriott was necessary. And so when you have a government's responsibility to build a country, if the government can't get local private sector people to have enough confidence to put their money in this thing, then they have to do it, because they know where they're taking the country.
Correct.
Because they know we need to build this infrastructure, we need to build this facility, because we're going to build the stadium.
Correct.
And because we're going to push the tourism sector. And because we're going to expand the Timeri Airport, and because we're going to expand the Ogle Airport, so we could have international flights coming not just from Cherry Jagan International Airport, but from Ogle International Airport. And because there's this whole food agenda thing that we're driving now, it's not now. It started a long time. Because we're going to drive a regional energy security, food security agenda, okay, we're going to work towards building out all of our sectors, which means you have to do so by engaging a diaspora people, by attracting foreign investment. And so you had to build a facility. Yeah. And so it was never the intention to build the Marriott and stay in the hotel business. It was the intention to build it because it was necessary to accommodate the growth and the trajectory of the country, and then at the appropriate time you sell it. Because as you rightly said, Mark, it is not the business of the government to run a business or to be in commercial enterprises. That's for the private sector. Correct. But if a country, if the government has a certain plan, a development plan, and we need this, and we're not getting the private people, you have to do it. And it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with the Berbice Bridge. What happened with the Berbice Bridge? Mm-hmm. You understand? And then and so that's the real story of the Marriott. The challenges, in fact, I should tell you now, people might look at me and say, oh well, if I had said this because I was told this. I was told that from people within the private sector that and who knows about the more of the inside details of the Marriott arrangement, of that whole transaction, that the government was unable to convince any of the private sector to put their money. Now, one might look at me and say, well, I can't verify that if it's true. Mm-hmm. Well, now I could verify this because this is going to be news for you. Right now, I can tell you that with all that is happening in this country, mm-hmm, with all the confidence and all the boom and all the takeoff and all the investment, there are certain investments that the government would like to see, and the private sector still can't wrap their heads around it. Yeah. The private sector still can't wrap their heads around it. And I'm within the private sector. I'm within these circles. So I know this for a fact. So I can speak authoritatively on it. So imagine now, with all that we have, we think we are able to get a lot of private investors. Yeah. Now, imagine, and I'm telling you, no, there are many other things that the government would like to see this private sector become more aggressive, more innovative, less risk averse, more proactive, taking on more risk and mm-hmm, being as innovative as possible. They are not moving at the pace of the government. They're not moving at the pace that the government would like. And this is facts. And this, you can see, those of you who pay attention to the president and the vice president, whenever they engage, and I'm present at almost every one of these private sector forums where the president is speaking or where the vice president is speaking, and the private sector boys get a whole load of licks from the president. And you could go and look at his presentation at Gisby, look at his presentation at the GCCI summit. I was one of the speakers on the panel there. Licks on the private sector. So even now, the government is unable to get the level of confidence and commitment from the private sector. Imagine during that era, when we were starved for foreign investments, our foreign investment flowing to this country. I was looking at the numbers today. There was a time from 1993 to about 2000, foreign direct investment averaged less than 100 million US a year. Mm. From 2000 to about somewhere around 2005 to 2012, it averaged less than 100 million US a year. Up to 2012, coming down to 2012-2015 period, foreign direct investment averaged less than 200 million US a year. Now, guess how much is foreign direct investment? It's averaging over 1 billion US. That's over 200 billion G dollars a year, mm-hmm, right? So you can't create jobs, you can't build the economy without attracting the type of investments needed to take the country where we want to take it, where the policymakers are steering us, and where we, as well as the people, would like to see this country go. For our children and for grandchildren and
Yeah,
for everybody else.
yeah. A
You know.
sustainable contribution. And many people may hear the numbers that you're referencing, and they may think, "Oh my God, that's a lot of money." But when it comes to the state level responsibility, it equates to nothing.
Mm.
So I know when people hear those numbers, and you're totally correct, they may think, oh my, Guyana is having a lot of money, prior to this level of degree of foreign direct investment. But it is quite sad to say that for quite some time, Guyana was even in a deficit. And many persons, so for persons who do not know what a deficit is basically that you owe money. Yes? And we were trying as a Guyanese populace to survive and even grow within that period. So what happened during that period, and many persons needed to take some cognizance of this, is a lot of subsidies was provided by the government during that period. And what is subsidies? This is when the government, or some through the government agencies, may provide some degree of tax breaks or concessions and different other stuff, just to stimulate the economy. Stimulate the economy meaning just to contribute towards the economy or the economic activity within businesses to continue. And from a political standpoint, it is quite important to understand that people should support one thing only, and it is prolific strategies in relation to politics. So what does that mean? If somebody has a great idea to manage this bottle and to make every drop of water here a bit more replenishing to the user, that's who you need to support, because literally within a contextual framework of politics, you support strategies that are generated from ideas. And if a group of people have very bright ideas, or very innovative ideas, it is logical. So this is what I have to say here. You're going to use logics to support your decision making process. So even if somebody may say, "Oh my gosh, I'm a normal person. I don't have the ability to do the analytics at a certain level." Let's look at deliverables. What is deliverables? Who can make something happen? And you choose that person who can make it happen simply because they have a more beneficial advantage to the country and the populace at large. We are at a stage in our economy. For those who may know the economic cycle and all of that, we're at a stage that we probably can be classified as now coming out of a drought, or a drought just after the recession. Yeah, because we didn't have any large economic activity. We survived basically by the government seeking loans or assistance from countries at a particular degree of interest rate, and trying to see how best they can stimulate the private sector to say, "Hey, grow, increase the GDP, increase your production, hire more people. Let's see how best that you can do this, so that foreign investors can look and see, listen, there is a degree of profitability in Ghana. There is something happening, because if you have a business, and let's say that you look at somebody's business and they're coming to you to borrow money, and you say, you're not doing well, why would I put my money there to waste?" So that's how the business world works. So when the government supported the private sector, it is within view of not favoritism or anything in that degree, but is looking at the most productive individuals within the business sectors, or the most productive sector within the economic within using an economic analysis, and say, listen, we're going to support this sector because this has a larger degree of profitability. You can hire more persons within this, and on a macro level, you can be able to support the regional or the international market with the production of these products. For a long time, we have been supporting ideologies and concepts that is just based on surface level analysis, superficial analysis, or even feelings. Oh, you have this feeling about this situation, so you're going to make this decision. I'm urging people to move away from such a thought process. I'm urging people to let's analyze things from a perspective of an informed place. Let us, yes, Joel.
No, speaking of which, I'm glad you make that point. Analyze things from an informed perspective, which reminds me that there is another important clarification I'd like to speak to, which I see the Peeping Tom writer or whoever writes for the Peeping Tom column in the Kaicho News wrote about. They didn't. What they wrote suggested that they don't understand what is a syndicated loan, even though it was explained in the most simplistic fashion by the vice president. So let me extend a little bit on what is a syndicated loan. The writer wrote that the vice president is confused because they're saying that when a financial institution advances a loan to a company or for whatever commercial investment one is applying for to undertake, that it's an investment. Now, from a financial standpoint, there are some distinguishing features by definition.
Correct.
Who is an investor, right? Versus who is a lender. So a bank is not considered an investor when they lend money.
Correct.
Right? They are a lender.
Yes.
That's what they're called, lending institutions. Right? An investor is an individual, or you also have institutional investors who are interested in the business in terms of putting capital into the business and generating a return vis-a-vis profit from that venture.
Yes.
Right? Banks are not interested in getting involved in the business and the business model per se.
Correct.
What they're interested in, you have a bankable project, you have a viable business plan, you have de-risk, you basically give them some collateral as well to cover their risk. They're going to lend you the money, that's why it's called a loan, and you have to pay it back. So it's not an investment when you pay it back at a cost, which is the interest rate. Right? The interest rate is the cost of that financing. So, and then there is the confusion. So that's one important clarification. Who is an investor, and is the bank considered an investor if the bank lending the same publisher to build a few buildings, is the bank an investor in that project? No, the bank is a lender of capital, not an investor. An investor participates in the profit. They put in equity capital and they participate in the profit. And equity capital also gives you ownership. So you have ownership and control. Right? That is what an investor has. That's the difference. A bank does not have ownership and control. Right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is a syndicated loan is not formed by different individuals coming and put their money to invest in this project through the bank. The bank, based on the size of the investment, right, and based on the risk, the risk characteristics of the project, and there are also some regulatory restrictions. For those reasons, the one bank would be restricted or unable to lend a certain amount to a single project.
Correct.
Right? So from a risk management standpoint, largely, and as well as regulatory restrictions, a bank would then, above a certain amount of loan, would then do a syndicated loan. Now, a syndicated loan, you have a lead bank which would be referred to as the arranger. One bank would be the arranger, meaning this one bank would take up the responsibility to do all of the legwork, to pitch it to the other banks and to get other banks on board, to put more money to make one loan into a syndicate, right? So in this case, Republic Bank was the arranger. They were the lead bank, and so they would have collaborated with other banks to put together this loan package, right? So it is not a case where there were some groups of investors go to the bank and through the bank invested in this project, right? So I want to explain that importantly. That's how a syndicate works. Now, the writer also said that if there are people who put money through this syndicated loan with an interest in this hotel, who are these people? Then we should know who are these people and get due diligence done for them and all of that, right?
Okay.
So I just want to explain a little bit of technicality. A bank is they engage in what you call they're a financial intermediary, meaning they're like a middleman. Between who? Between depositors and borrowers, right? There are people who deposit money with a bank, and there are people who want to borrow money.
Correct.
So instead of you coming to me and asking me to borrow $5,000, I don't have the confidence in you that you will repay the $5,000. But I go to the bank and I put the $5,000 in a savings account, and then you go to the bank, and the bank takes the same $5,000 that I put there and lend it to you.
Yeah.
And because of the due diligence and the risk and all of that that the bank goes through, and because they do this as it is institutionalized,
Correct.
right? If the bank lend you my money, I still get back my money from the bank,
Correct.
even if you don't pay it back. But if I lend you, I take on that risk.
And they even have recoup mechanism or
Right.
all of that. Yeah.
They gotta have reserve on, but we're not going into all of that technicalities. But you then, if I lend you directly, I lose my money if you don't pay it back. But if I go
It's
to
a
the
higher
bank
risk.
and you borrow from the bank, they have to give me back my money. It's a loss for the bank, not me.
Okay.
So a syndicate, the writer may be right in a sense that essentially what the bank is doing is taking thousands of depositors' money, and this is the business of banking, taking thousands of depositors' money and lend to people. That's the business of banking. So you don't need to go, okay, how much let's say it was 50 million. That's let's say $10 billion. That $10 billion is probably equivalent to about 400,000 household depositors. Are you going to take all these 400,000 people and put their files? Because that's how banking operates. That's how the nature of the business operates. No, right? And that is why it is a regulated operation. There are laws, there are anti-money laundering laws and all of that. But that's just how banking is. The person doesn't, or the writer doesn't understand that they're confusing and conflating a number of issues between an investor and a lender. And if you're taking this person money, no.
And their responsibilities generally.
Yeah. So speaking of,
But I want to ask you a question before you go on, Joel. Do you think that there is a willful distortion or misinterpretation of these technical information?
Well, I would say it's a from my observation, it's a combination of both. And you alluded to one of the points earlier, where is does this person have an agenda? And you spoke to it at length. But for me, it's a combination of both, in the sense it's a combination of willfully or deliberately doing that, as well as ignorance of the technical issues, right? Ignorance of the and basic lack of basic understanding of these technical issues.
Correct.
Right?
I support that.
Yeah.
I support that.
So, and speaking of that, I want to pick up another thing quickly before we close on the last topic, which I want to touch on, but the one is a little bit touchy. There is another peep in Tom which talks about, and this is a burning question they keep They keep repeating, are we going to cap interest rate on in for the oil and gas in the oil and gas sector? Again, you can't cap interest rate. Why? Because interest rate is the cost of capital.
Correct.
You go to the bank, well, the oil companies, they raise their money in international capital markets. And international capital markets are more sophisticated than in Guyana. Here in Guyana, you have fixed interest rates, despite what happens in the economy, whether you have, whether you have growth or
Or
contraction
retraction. Yeah.
or whatever the case is, you have fixed interest rates. In sophisticated, efficient financial markets, you have floating uh, interest rate which fluctuate based on market dynamics. You understand? So you have what you call interest rate risk. The interest rate could either move upwards or downwards. Okay, so that is the environment in which the oil companies operate by virtue of raising their capital
The
in
capital.
international markets. Now, that being said, interest rate is a cost for the financing to develop the resource. So you can't put a cap on interest rate. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they want to know what is the interest rate. Now, the interest rate is not a secret. There are two ways. If you want to know what is the interest rate, ExxonMobil is a publicly traded company on Wall Street, which means Exxon's, the parent company, their annual report, their
It's
financial
published.
information is is public information, right? And if you go through that report, 2 years ago, the weighted average cost of capital was about 8%. That's about 2 or 3 years ago, just before the pandemic. Now, the weighted average cost of capital for ExxonMobil, it's just over 10%. And we've talked about this a lot. What is causing to we're because of all these things happening in the global economy,
All the macro
all
factors.
these volatilities and risks and all these things happening in different parts of the world, and climate change policies, and you've heard them. These are contributing to higher cost of capital, higher cost of raising capital,
Correct.
not only locally but internationally,
Correct.
right? So that the interest rate that ExxonMobil is subject to on the cost of capital is public information. You don't need the vice president to tell you that. You don't even need ExxonMobil to tell you that. It's public information. Okay. The second thing is, if you look at the capital structure of the Guyana operation, there's a very low level of debt. They borrow about less than 50% of the capital is borrowed money, which means the rest of the capital is from their equity. It's investors' money,
Yeah.
investors' capital, not borrowed money. So if you look at it, 2021 financial information, which again is public information, and they have it. The entire media, all the media houses
But
here
did they have
have
the
their
ability
financials.
to interpret it correctly?
Well, one of their chartered accountants did some analysis and wrote about it in one of the newspapers, right? A certain chartered accountant, right? And if you look at the interest cost, the finance cost, it's less than 1% of the revenue. So what was the problem? Every business, including those same people, they have to incur high interest rate at the bank.
Correct.
And the interest rate here is around 8, 10%, 12%, 13%, and all kind of nothing different from what Exxon is getting, nothing fantastic from what Exxon is. In fact, they're paying more. Commercial interest rate here is probably higher than the weighted average cost of Exxon.
Especially based on our activities. I think, to support what you've said, Joel, respectfully to everyone, is that financial and economic analytics have so much of factors and implications as it relates towards what drives one's economic reports, and I think to be able to respect the opinion of somebody of such, you need to first question one, their agenda, their competency, and more so the understanding of the global implications of the activities that are happening. And I humbly would request people to do two things. One is to understand that all the economic activities in relation to foreign direct investment, government developmental agendas, is here within view of developing the society and increasing um, the the share capital per income as it relates to each household. The Human Development Index in Ghana, which is AGI, which represents the capital per household, meaning like the average value of money that a household receives and spends, and that encapsulate their financial responsibilities and all of that, is that the government is looking at this. Listen, we need to increase this, and still we need to manage respectfully through different means of subsidies so that you don't have inflation. Because you can give people a lot of money and responsively, the goods could raise and you'll still not be able to afford it. So all of these are factors that people need to take into account. And the reason why I'm alluding and drawing to this conclusion is that I do understand that some people may be opposing some of the developmental issues by saying that the Guyanese public is not getting the value that they should get, or they should have an increased share of income. But all of these factors and all of these things that people are referring to needs to be managed intelligently. Otherwise, it can be very catastrophic. It can be catastrophic in the long run. That whereby that you have an economy that is failing due to the fact that you didn't manage the resources and the revenue for businesses, the revenue wasn't managed appropriately, and income, which is on a personal capacity of individual, was not managed appropriately in terms of dispensation, meaning like you didn't give people a particular value that that they can responsibly manage without creating for the issues in society. So there are institutions, as I say, so we use the word government loosely because we often use that to to um, to represent just the people on that are appointed to cabinet, but government encapsulate the entire arm of government, the institution. So when I say government in terms of utilizing the same concept of generalization, I'm talking about utilizing so I'm talking about government through their institutions also. So when I say manage or government managing is through their institutions, through their various institutions that stimulate business growth, through their health institutions that look after the public health interest. So please, viewers, we're gonna examine a bit more matters in detail. This evening's program was just to highlight within a broad context of what is going on in Ghana, how people are interpreting information. I try not to keep it too technical, since that I understand that people need to just understand from a generalist point of view what is going on and how it's going on. And then as they get that premise to work with, if we go into technical areas a bit further, you can not be lost in any given sense, but you can be able to build on the conceptual framework of the information that we're providing.
So Mark, we have about roughly 8 minutes remaining
Yes.
to wrap up. The last thing I want to talk about is the media in a
Mm-hmm.
general sense. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not referring to any specific issue, but
Mm-hmm.
generally there has been recent events,
Mm-hmm.
and not one event, but there are several recent events that occurred in which the media and the media association, the press association, that is the body that represents the entire fraternity,
Yeah.
had cause to speak out on some of these issues and label label it in a way that there is an attack on the media
Mm.
by politicians and by other other persons,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I want to say a few things. When the media is supposedly being attacked, everybody hears about it. It makes the headline news. But what about when the media runs a smear campaign on
Mm.
others, not just politicians, but professionals and other people? And I'm not speaking from a speculative perspective. I can use myself as an example.
Mm-hmm.
One media house talk about smear campaign on journalists, which I'm not condoning smear campaign on anybody
And
for that matter.
anybody, yeah.
I'm not condoning smear campaign on professionals.
But they have a
But
social
but
responsibility
there
not
is a
to.
saying in Guyana
Mm-hmm.
that you can't go to the crab dance and don't expect to get mud on your
Uh,
skin. Meaning you can't want to dabble in politics
mm-hmm.
and don't expect to get what is the norm in politics, which is not
Mm.
only unique to Guyana, but globally, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's just a side comment. But I've been the same media house
Mm-hmm.
not so long ago, just a few months ago, would have run a period of smear campaign on me.
Mm.
Write up all sorts of things about me, went on the radio program and said all sorts of things about me, and it went on for a few weeks. I didn't complain. I did not attack the media because I understand that if I'm going to dabble in politics and if I'm going to speak and write on th- thought-provoking issues, on controversial issues, on policy, on public policy issues that can be controversial and well, not so much controversial but contentious.
Mm-hmm.
People with different agenda will come after you. I understand that,
Yeah, that makes
right?
sense.
So, what is your what is your take on that?
My take is this. I do understand that there are many strategies that people use to detour persons from achieving their particular objectives, and in your sense, your objective is to deliver credible financial analytics to the viewers and the public, and also to try to manage distortions. Uh, I humbly suggest that everyone in the media or persons that who can hear this broadcast understand that there is a social responsibility of the media houses and people to promote peace. And if you're insightful with your criticisms or analytics, it does not promote peace, but it's more so from a position of being an agitator. And I want to bring this up. There's a theory of cockroach, right? It sounds kind of funny and crazy, but what is the theory of cockroach? It is understanding that the cockroach in this theory is defined as an agitator. And how could you manage such an agitator? And one of the references within the conceptual basis of this theory is to remain calm, to remain focused, to remain objective, and to manage yourself in such a way that you're able to overcome the challenge. So when I'm saying that as a reference is that I'm urging you, Joel, to continue your valuable contribution and also to remain highly focused in delivering your credible work. And to anyone that is representing development and to anyone that is coming to that end, that understand that great people always have a fight. You'll always have a challenge because you're unique in your individual capacity and you're unique in the course of action. So I understand that, and I understand why people oppose that because it's scary. It's scary to see something new. It's scary to see somebody doing something that others hope that they can possibly or potentially act in that capacity. Yeah.
Absolutely. And in closing, I just want to say on the topic of the media and
Mm-hmm.
within that within that topical issue, whether there is an attack on the media.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I just want to say this that as someone wrote in the comments there, that it's called free press. Of course, it's called free press. And we need to maintain that in our society.
But the quality
But what I
of
would like to
operation,
see, what I would like to see is more meaningful dialogue,
yes,
debate and discussion facilitated by the media
correct,
and carried by the media.
correct,
We're not having enough of that,
correct.
right?
I agree with you, Joe.
That is what I would like to see more, because I am not averse to criticism. I don't think the government is averse to criticism. Criticism is good, but what kind of criticism? You know. So we need to move away from these emotive type of stuff, emotive type of debate, and have more evidence-based, impactful debate that, in a constructed way,
In view of
that
development,
could contribute in a positive way to policy making and shaping policy making and the decisions at the national level.
correct.
Right. So with that, any closing thoughts from you?
I would just like to say thank you, the viewers, and hopefully you guys can share the positive message of this program, that when we log in the next time, that we can have more viewership, and possibly we'll obviously review the comments to see what we can do and what we can review in terms of contribution and topic creation. So all I have to say is thank you.
All right. So thank you and good night.
Good night.